Patterns in the air. People turning against you, reading your thoughts. Voices in your head that you cannot distinguish from reality, constantly telling you to kill yourself. Imagine trying to grow up, become successful, and make your mother proud of you, all while struggling to distinguish what is reality and what is not. For many, this sounds like a horror story, but for Carol North, it was her life. Carol North was a diagnosed schizophrenic, and like many schizophrenics, she too had petrifying hallucinations and delusions that were difficult to ignore. With countless hospitalizations only leading to more drugs which showed no signs in curing her symptoms, Carol North found it almost impossible not to obey the voice's commands to end her life. Luckily, Carol North was led to a psychiatrist who was able to cure her mental illness. Carol North is now a psychiatrist herself, helping those who are affected by the same illness. She wants to make sure her patients get the best diagnosis because she knows the pain and struggle that comes with the label of being a schizophrenic. From an early age, Carol North claims she had the classic symptoms of schizophrenia. She heard voices in her head but assumed they were normal and did not speak of them. She was able to ignore these symptoms for quite some time until her fears became too great. Her family home caught fire, and after her and her family fled from the house, they watched as their house went up in flames. Carol began to have vivid hallucinations after this. She started becoming too afraid to even sleep in her own room at night. She would mistake the flowered pattern on her pillowcase for millions of bugs crawling. She had to sleep in her parents' room almost every night, but soon was unable to find comfort in herself, let alone find it in her parents. At the age of 6, North was examined by her first psychiatrist. The doctor assumed that she just was faking her symptoms to gain attention. He blamed her mother for it, saying that she was causing the problem by feeding into it and giving her the attention she so desperately wanted. He assumed that she was just a frightened child, so he created a reward system in which she would be rewarded for every day she showed no signs of fear. Carol experienced no changes in her symptoms, but instead learned how to lie about the fear. She wanted to gain the praise and attention from the doctor and her family. She did not want to disappoint them, especially her mother, who was always wanting her to do the best in everything she did. She continued to mask these feelings and symptoms until her teen years, when they became truly too hard to handle. As a teenager, Carol struggled with her mental illness. She constantly felt different from her peers and distanced herself from others. She felt that others could read her mind, and she felt as if her mother was the worst at doing this because she was driven by the evil forces that controlled her. Because of this, she did many things to cause tension between her and her mother. She would often stare at her mother for long periods of time because she believed that she could control her to stop reading her mind. At the age of 17, Carol decided that the delusions, voices, and her mother were too much for her to handle. This was her first of many suicide attempts. Carol graduated high school and was excited to go off to college. She thought that she was able to run away from her illness and her mother, who was constantly reading her thoughts. But unfortunately, when college came around in the fall, so did her hallucinations and voices. No matter how much she tried to hide herself in her studies, the voices always made their way through. Carol's college years brought out the worst in her schizophrenia. With the stress of trying to manage her schoolwork and her illness, it quickly became too much for her to handle. She lapsed into a catatonic state, or a state of immobility, where she could no longer get out of her bed. She would see sounds as waves, and when she moved her hands, she would see multiple hands following it. She was hospitalized, but no medications helped her illness, and ultimately, the experience gave her more stress because all she wanted to do was focus on her studies. Hospitalizations like this went on continuously throughout her college experience. She would be released from the hospital only to find more hallucinations and sensations. Once she believed that there were helicopters flying over campus sending her messages. One night, she was found wandering around campus in the snow. When the police asked her what she was doing, she claimed that the helicopters sent her out of the dorm. She was put into a locked psychiatric ward after this incident. Her psychiatrist yet again blamed Carol's mother for her illness. He claimed that her mother's constant pressure on her to be the best she can be created these schizophrenic episodes. Eventually, Carol was able to fake her recovery enough to return to her classes. She continued ignoring her schizophrenia until a failed chemistry exam took her back into a downward spiral. The voices came back, convincing her to kill herself, leading her to her second failed suicide attempt. She was able to pull herself together and hide the voices and the delusions enough to make it into medical school until she failed another test, leading her to her third and final suicide attempt. Carol North luckily was led to a caring doctor that had a treatment breakthrough. He decided to use dialysis as a treatment method, which had never been used on anyone with this type of mental illness before. Dialysis is a method that is often used in curing kidney disease. It is used to flush toxins out of the blood. The doctor discovered that there is a possibility that schizophrenia is caused by a substance in the blood. Carol agreed to be the first to test this, and it ultimately worked in her favor. After the first treatment, her symptoms improved greatly, and by the second treatment, Carol claims that she was cured. Carol was able to finish medical school and go on to be a successful psychiatrist. She is now a professor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in the departments of psychiatry and emergency medicine. North obtains many prestigious awards such as the Nancy and Ray L. Hunt Chair, and she inspires many with her stories filled with struggle, failure, and strength and triumph.